Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode number 18 of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. This is my first time recording in 2024, so Happy New Year. Let me know in the comments if you have a chess New Year's resolution. If you're chasing a rating goal or maybe something else, let me know. Would love to hear. And let's hop into things. So coming into today, rated 1087. Hopefully I can break 1100. And we'll seek a 10-minute game. First opponent, playing Nathaniel Wortley. And I'll play King's Pawn, e5. We have a Vienna, which is definitely a popular opening at actually across all levels. I'll play knight f6 here, the standard move, just trying to accelerate the kingside development. And we see the Vienna Gambit, which I believe I encountered once before in the speedrun series. The best move here is to play pawn to d5 to counterattack the center, and if white takes on e5, I can then recapture on e4, and it's a fair trade. Now these lines do have a tendency to get pretty imbalanced pretty quickly, of course depending what white plays. Queen f3 is the most popular move, as far as I know. Knight f3 is also an alternative. But I'm pretty sure Levy, Gotham Chess, recommends this move. Used to make a lot of content around the Vienna opening, Vienna Gambit. And in this position, I'm going to go for f5. Following the same game I played a few episodes prior. After I record this, I'll find the game and link it down below if you want to see that game as well. But f5 is a nice move to reinforce the knight. And if white en passant, then I can just recapture and life will be fine. Bishop d3 is not a move I don't think I've seen before. It does exert a bit more pressure against the knight, but I mean the knight's well supported by the pawns. More common is pawn d3 instead of bishop d3. So this is the first moment kind of on my own to try and figure things out, not relying on any opening preparation. A move that stands out to me is knight c6, very simply developing and attacking the undefended pawn, especially because white doesn't have this move, or even this move yet. So it might be a bit awkward for white to defend the pawn. Go for this. White could consider taking, but then take back and grab the bishop pair. So yeah, I'm curious what white's going to play here. Like queen f4 might be the only safe way to defend the pawn. Oh, bishop b5 too. Okay. Didn't see that coming, but that does pin the knight. Also, probably it's just a better square for the bishop rather than on d3, no longer blocking the d-pawn. So what to do here? I mean, white lost a tempo with the bishop, but not sure how much I can actually punish that. Bishop d7 definitely comes to mind. Simply break the pin. Bishop d7 could walk into some muddy waters, like there's takes and then takes. It should be okay. And then if takes, there's some calculation where if I take with the bishop, then my f-pawn could hang. But yeah, this is definitely a candidate move. I'm also looking at bishop c5 here, which I kind of like better, just preparing to castle, but also creating threats of knight f2 or bishop f2. Let's go for this. I'm also preventing white from playing d4. So yeah, very natural, very multi-purpose move. And I think it's a common theme across a lot of the games in this series. At least from early on, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible with developing the opening. And trying to be quicker than my opponent too. Like sometimes if you can develop your minor pieces more quickly, then you can be the first one to generate tactics. And one drawback with the Vienna is white no longer has f-pawn, so this diagonal is a bit more exploitable. White has to be super careful here. Maybe a move like knight h3 to cover f2. White takes first. Okay, we'll take back. White could also consider taking on e4. And then I'll have a choice which pawn to recapture with. Also, I didn't know, what country is this? Australia. Okay, I should be able to identify Australian flag. Maybe sometimes gets confused with New Zealand. Okay, we see knight ge2. So white is allowing this move or this move. I mean, knight f2, rook f1, I don't think I accomplished much. Bishop f2, king will have to move. It is a nice way to take away white's castling rights. Especially white wants to play d4 next. So I probably don't want to allow d4 to happen right away just to attack the bishop. But I'm trying to figure out a follow-up. Like bishop f2, king will move, and then what? I move the bishop back maybe. So I guess the question is it worth spending a couple of bishop moves to force the king to f1 or d1? And what are my other choices? Like d4 doesn't look so great. Queen h4 is also a move to consider, but that runs into g3. So I think I will go for this. And then the bishop can drop back to b6. So then if white plays d4, it doesn't gain more time on the bishop. Yeah, let's go all the way back. It seems a bit strange, like moving the bishop a couple times, but I'm now clearing f2 square for the knight, so I do have the threat of knight f2 with a fork. I think white is likely to play d4 here. But interesting game so far. I like the position, but I don't think I'm like so much better. Maybe just some very small types of advantages between having the bishop pair, having a hopefully more safe king once I castle. I think it is time to castle. Gets the rook to a nice square, aligned with the white queen. And d3, okay. So yeah, I think I'm pretty much provoked to take on c3. I don't see a more attractive option. Like knight g5, queen will move, knight will have to move again. I could maneuver it back to e6, perhaps. But I think trading is fine. And now one of the plans moving forward is to use these pawns to grab space. Like we're in the middle game. At least I'm in the middle game. Like I've castled, I've developed my bishop. I guess my other pieces could use some development as well. But I'd like to formulate some plan here. And what I would really like to do is like expand with c5, c4, d4, etc. If I play c5 too early, then it hangs d5. So I'm going to play bishop e6, which, okay, first of all, develops the bishop, but secondly, it over-defends this pawn. So now that I have 3 defenders, I can safely play c5 without blundering a pawn. And usually when you have the bishop pair, you want to look for the opportunities for pawn breaks. You also just want to look for general tactics. I think, yeah, white just blundered a pretty simple tactic. d4 is a fork. Now I'm taking a pause here because I can also take, and then play d4. I'm not sure if there's a big difference. I guess if I play d4 immediately, white could take and counterattack. So maybe it is better to take, d4, and then there's just less counterplay. Also simplify. So yeah, white was just not aware of the danger with this pawn move. I mean, I will say white played a pretty good game up until bishop e3 on move 14 and queen e4. blundering the queen. Not sure if that was a mouse slip or just succumbing to the pressure in the position, but okay, pretty abrupt ending. I mean, my opponent found some like interesting moves. I mean, Bishop D3 was maybe a small mistake, losing some time, but Bishop B5 I think was the right follow-up. And yeah, with Bishop F2, black is definitely for choice. And then going forward here, I think as white, you just have to find a different way to develop. Maybe Bishop F4, maybe a move like Knight E2 to get the knight here and target the bishop, prepare this move. So some better options for white. But nice game overall. And I mean, for anyone that plays King's Pawn opening as black, you definitely want to be prepared for Vienna. And in the line that I just played with D5 and then F5 against Queen F3 is a nice line to get a very playable position. So let's move on. That was the first game. We'll play the second 10-minute game. Rated 1095. So if I win this game, I think I will break 1100. Playing Ninja Nicholas, and we have a Scandinavian. So Scandinavian, very popular opening at the lower levels. Queen A5 is the most common move. And there's a few moves I like to play in this position. If I was playing a more like dubious aggressive repertoire, I do like the move B4, and there's some traps with that line. But I'm going to play in a more solid fashion. D4 is the most principled move. And I'll go for a setup. It's another kind of opening I learned back when I was around the age of 9 or 10. My first chess coach taught me a pretty thorough repertoire with the white pieces. And against this early pin, I'm actually trying to remember the exact approach. Bishop C4 is one option, which just aims to develop and castle. It also has a threat of maybe some Bishop F7 under the right circumstances. But there's another idea here to play H3 first. And I think in this case, H3 is a nice move to throw in, just to put the ball in black's court. Because if takes takes, I'm very happy to activate the queen, which we do see. Maybe after the game, I'll explain a bit more about the opening strategy for white. But going forward from here, let's complete development. I could start with Bishop C4. I think that looks very, very nice. Develop and then Queen takes F7 or Bishop takes F7. And now I can castle or start with Bishop F4. And sometimes when you're deciding between two like very natural opening moves, the question to ask is, what does the opponent want to do next? And one move that black probably wants to play is Bishop D6. So if I start with Bishop F4, that just prevents Bishop D6. And okay, I guess maybe Bishop B4 can be played, but then I can castle, and the queen helps defend the knight. So let's start with this. I'm actually realizing that we're following one of the most memorable games from my childhood, which did not feature G5, but I'll have a lot to show after this game because, yeah, I do have a story about what can happen from this position. But my opponent does play G5, which is defended by the queen. Now, I mean, I think I just want to move back. There's not really much else to consider. Like Bishop E5 would lose material after knight takes E5, and then queen also helps attack. I mean, I'm looking at a move like B4, but that only allows black to take and attack both bishops. So, retreat. Not the biggest concession. If anything, black probably has made a concession by weakening the king side. Although maybe black, wow, black castles queen side. So I was going to say that, yeah, it's not likely black will castle king side. So going forward from here, I mean, if I want to just win a pawn right away, I could take on f7. I also kind of just want to castle and get my king safe first. Like taking on f7, honestly, I don't see anything wrong with it. I guess there's a small concern that black just develops and then, like if I take, then rook e8 and my queen could get stuck. Actually, rook e8, rook e7 would potentially trap my queen. Maybe it's okay because then I can take with the bishop. The other thing I want to point out here is there's some very strong attacking ideas with the bishop piercing through this dark square diagonal, and the queen also aimed towards black's castling setup. So I think I'm going to just castle here. If black gives me another chance, maybe I'll then consider taking on f7. And black does give me another chance. So yeah, I don't want to take too much time, but this is definitely still an option. Of course, d4 is now attacked. There's another option to play knight e4 to target the d6 square, which is no longer supported by black's bishop. I'm also looking at ideas of b4. Like if the queen weren't here, imagine the queen's just off the board. I would have queen takes c6, pawn takes c6, and then bishop a6 checkmate. I forget what we call that. Maybe Boden's mate. So I'm actually looking for ways to set that up. But I still want to be proper with like not playing anything dubious. b4 looks nice, but I'm not seeing the clear follow-up after queen takes b4. Then takes, and then takes. It's not mate because queen b7. So I'm going to go for this move. Rather than snagging the pawn, I'm attacking, so I'm not really attacking g5 because the queen defends g5, but I am threatening this really nasty check on d6. And that would force a king to one of these squares, which would then set up a discovery for me. So spend a lot of time in the opening, but and partly because there's a lot of things to explain in this position. Black defends f-pawn, but now it's time to hop in, be forcing the king to c7 or b8. Now I'm actually trying to figure out, like, what's the best discovery? Probably knight takes f7, like attacking most of the things in the position. Because knight takes b7 attacks the king and the queen, but then king takes b7. So let's take, I mean, this attacks the king, both rooks, also leaves this pawn undefended. And now we'll take the rook in the corner. So I think the strategy from here is to like keep snagging material and then to simplify, to play a bit quicker. Already below 4 minutes. I want to make sure I don't get too low on time. But yeah, the position is very nice now. Two bishops in a pretty open position. Maybe still some attacking potential. Like b4 is still not out of the question because queen takes b4 and rook b1. My queen is attacked here. Let's just move it. Hitting the pawn on h7. Black defends and attacks. Yeah, at this point, I think I just want to trade queens. And if takes, I'll have a nice choice between pawn or bishop takes. Go for bishop takes, which will likely lead to more trades. And this is a nice construction. Pawn defends the bishop, bishop defends the pawn. If rook e8, I'll just safely move away the bishop. Okay, knight e4. So let's trade bishops. And yeah, now it's time to get the rooks involved. Attacking the knight. Knight's going to have to find a square, probably d6 or f6. Moves to d2, then I can trap it. Now I'm going to play a sneaky move, bishop to b3, which clears e6 square because the rook really wants to go here to attack both knights. Now, I'm actually not winning a knight immediately because black has, I mean, one of these moves, but okay, misses it. If a knight were to move to f5, I would have played g4. Now I'm up a full rook. Let's kick the knight. We'll try and keep it simple here. And one of the strategies to convert a position like this, you want to get both rooks on the opponent's 7th rank. In this case, yeah, black 7th rank. And then I can start targeting this b7 pawn. I should also note it's very useful I have my pawn on h3. If it was on h2, I'd be losing. But, okay, now should be very close to winning. King has a couple moves. Checking isn't quite mate. So let's move back. And the nice thing about having the rooks on the 7th with the king on the 8th rank is, yeah, there's so many mating ideas with back rank. So, okay, that concludes my mission to reach 1100. Gained a few points that game. And let me try and share a few lessons from the opening. For one, when I played h3, I'll start by saying that taking is probably a slight mistake because black just traded off the only developed minor piece to help me activate, and the queen is actually very good on f3, as we saw in the game. So there are a couple other options for black. Now there's actually a trap in this position. Black has a fancy move, queen h5, which some players might go for to pin the h-pawn to the rook and also increase pressure along the diagonal. The reason why black is basically falling into a trap here is white can happily take the bishop, lose a rook, and in this position, white can trap the queen in just 2 more moves, and it's basically unstoppable. If you want to try and find the move, feel free to pause the video. But very simply, knight e2. Also, knight e4 probably works as well. Idea to get the knight to g3, and there's just no way black can stop this move. Knight f6, knight g3. White's controlling all the squares. Very nice. A knight just attacks the queen in the corner, and the bishop plays a role from c1 controlling h6. So this is a trap I learned pretty early on. Not too often players will fall into this because most players don't even look to consider queen h5. So the best move is probably bishop to h5. But from here, the idea is to play pawn to g4, and after bishop g6, play knight e5. And it's a way more energetic and aggressive approach. But white can afford to expand because, okay, the king is still fine in the center, hasn't committed to the king side. And the plan going forward from here is sometimes to get the knight to c4 to harass the queen, usually combined with bishop f4. There's also cases where white can go for h4, h5. So just a more aggressive way to try and challenge black from early on. So going back to what happened in the game, I do want to use this game to share a story from my childhood, because when I was rated around 1300 US rating, I forget how old I was, maybe 11 years old, 12 years old. I played in a tournament where I was playing against a 2000 rated player, and I ended up winning from, I think it was this exact position in just 4 more moves. I might forget the move order. I forget if my opponent played knight f6 or castled, but basically what happened is knight f6 was played, I castled, black castled like this. So we got a very similar position to what I just had in this game, and I played the move rook to d1. My opponent played the move queen to b4, attacking my pawn and my bishop, both of which are undefended. And the clever young boy that I was at 11 or 12 years old, I played a very funny move here, bishop a6, Now, this is long before the "oh no, my queen" or "oh no, my anything" sort of meme, but can imagine that I was maybe quietly saying to myself, "oh no, my bishop." And I was really hoping my 2000 rated opponent would take the bishop because then this is checkmate. But he didn't take the bishop. He played the move knight to b6. And this is also just as bad as taking the bishop because I went ahead and played queen takes c6, ending the game on the spot. And this is a pretty aesthetic mate. The bishop pins a pawn to the king. The queen can't be taken. This bishop helps control b8. Now, I should note my opponent was an older man rated. He was rated 2000, but he had a floor, so he was playing for so many decades that his rating couldn't go below 2000. So it's not a typical mistake an expert player will make. But yeah, shortly after this game, maybe a few weeks later, this position appeared in, I think it was a chess column of the Chicago Tribune. So if I can find the newspaper clipping, maybe I'll have to include it in this video. But definitely pretty memorable to upset a much higher rated opponent at a young age. So going back, let me just address what happened in this game. Yeah, I went for knight e4, and I think black is already in trouble here. Like maybe black can go for knight b6, but actually knight b6 would be a good try because the bishop's attacked. If I play knight d6, then rook takes d6. Takes kind of muddies the waters. So yeah, maybe I would just drop back first and then prepare knight d6. But yeah, usually like in these positions, black should be really, really careful before castling kingside. Probably should have not played g5 and gone for kingside castling. Was a safer approach. So anyway, let's do one more. I know that was kind of a long explanation, but hopefully some lessons for everyone to take away. And as always, if you guys have questions, feel free to leave them below. I do enjoy reading the comments and trying to clarify anything that might not be clear. So moving on, playing Magnus, but not Magnus Carlsen, playing Magnus Favero. And we have another king's pawn, d4, the center game. So queen takes d4. I have encountered this opening maybe a couple times so far this speed run. Very simply, developing the knights is the best approach in this opening. Just get the early lead in development with the black pieces, which you can't always do. And we see e5, which I did encounter one game previously. And the best move here is knight to g4, simply attacking the queen and the pawn. Now, I think the one game I played in this position, my opponent had played queen f4 and just allowed me to take the pawn. Queen e2 is definitely a much trickier move because now if I take the pawn, which looks very natural, just save the knight, then the knight will be pinned and that allows pawn f4. And then black is probably just worse there, losing the knight. So the move to go for in this position is d6, which at first looks self-destructive because I'm allowing white to take with check. And now I'm temporarily down 2 pawns. 2 pawns? No, only down 1 pawn. But I do save the knight, and I have the move bishop to e6. And after takes, I take back, then I will be down 1 pawn. But I'll be much ahead in development. And I'm pretty sure I showed this exact line in the analysis of the recent episode where I faced this opening. And I'm pretty sure the engine will say that black is just winning after takes and takes. But I'm not sure if white has a better move here, because I'm ready to take back complete development of the minor pieces. So yeah, it's a nice example of a position where the material situation doesn't really tell the whole story. Like white's up a pawn, but so much compensation, so much development for the pawn, more center control. the queen will be a target on e2. Like I'm already threatening knight d4 to attack the queen and the c2 pawn. So it's going to be hard for white to safely untangle and develop. Like the queen on e2 also blocks the bishop. So this is one of these openings which I guess can be considered like a very good gambit for black. Like sacking a pawn early to get a massive attack. Yeah, I don't think I need to move this knight. Like knight d4 immediately, attacking the queen, unleashing my queen, so yeah, let's go for this. No mercy. Also preventing queen b5. White doesn't have an easy counterattack. And if I get to take on c2, and the king has to move, wherever it ends up moving to, I'll probably have checks along the d file, maybe another fork on f2. If king e2, there's a pin, bishop c4. I mean, I'm getting very much rewarded for just having my pieces developed and on good squares. Like usually when your pieces are on good squares, the tactics will come. In this position, they're coming very quickly. Yeah, so white can either get pinned, get forked, or I guess get triple forked. Yeah, I feel a little bit bad for my opponent, like such savageness from the black side, but it's an important lesson. Like white played what is basically just a bad opening. I know some players can struggle against a center game if they don't quite know exactly what to do. But yeah, now it's white really struggling. So 11 move win, a nice final position. I think we'll end it there. It was a feel good game to wrap up this episode. Rated 11-12 now. So next goal will be to start working my way towards 1200. I don't know if there's much to analyze in this game. Like generally, if you do play the center game, you shouldn't play e5. I think e5 is just not a good move. Even though it is aggressive, maybe some players would fall into the trap of takes an f4, and then white is for choice here. But yeah, if you ever encounter this as black, the key move is d6, and then yeah, it's already very good for black. So white should play knight c3 here. And then usually the plan is bishop d2 and castling. And yeah, this opening is definitely playable if white chooses to go for this plan. So anyway, we'll end it there. Thanks everyone for watching. If you have questions, leave them below. If you like the content, like and subscribe. It does help the channel. And I'll see you guys soon.